fabulous edition of Ottawa International Book Expo Presents, and we have an amazing guest today to talk about his amazing books as a local Ottawa publisher. Take it away, Santosh.
Charles Mwewa is a dad, author, unlicensed lawyer, licensed paralegal, educator, and moral and social influencer. Mwewa is the author of 33 books and counting in all genres: fiction, novel, nonfiction, and poetry. Mwewa writes for book markets. First, in Canada, where some of his books are used for academia as well as for student preparation. Second, Mwewa writes for Zambia, where some of his books have been adopted and used in universities and religious schools. Last, he writes for the world, where his books on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, etc. bring a sizable monthly revenue, as his books are sold in more than 10 major markets: the UK, US, Germany, Australia, China, France, the Scandinavians, Japan, Denmark, Spain, Italy, and Netherlands. Mwewa is a Zambian Canadian. His wife and their three girls reside in the capital city of Ottawa, Canada. He has an LLB, BA in Education, BA in Legal Studies, Certificate in Law, DIBM, and is also an LLM candidate. Charles Mwewa's writings are based on three major themes: law, God, and intelligence. These themes are creatively weaved individually or jointly into all his books. They are together modeled on the philosophy of endless eternal relevance. In other words, Charles Mwewa writes books that transcend time, cultures, and generations. His books are relevant today, were relevant yesterday, and will be relevant tomorrow. Charles began as a self-published author. However, as he continued to see his works benefit more the publisher than himself, he purposed to turn his interest of writing into publishing. Together with his colleague, in or around 2009, they revamped Africa in Canada Press, ACP, which had been registered in 2005. With dedication and patience, ACP has published most of his books and other authors' books. Charles Mwewa and the ACP produce, market, and distribute their own publications all over the world. Welcome to the show, Mr. Mwewa, and we're very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
No problem.
Welcome to the show, Mr. Mwewa. So definitely we're grateful that you could join us today. So when I was reading some information about you, I saw that you were inspired by Mr. Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon, into becoming a writer and becoming a writer who transcends sort of time, so to speak. So can you sort of give us a bit of an insight in terms of how Mr. Bezos has inspired you?
So it was in 2005, if I'm correct, and I was watching television. I was in a city called Calgary in Alberta, and I saw this man come on television, and he was sharing a concept. At that time, brick and mortar kind of publishing was the norm, and this guy was speaking about a concept that would invade the markets in the book publishing as well as authoring. And he mentioned of in the next 15 or so years that books would be mostly marketed through online digital media and facilities, etc. So at that time, I had published a few self-published books. I had even published one before I immigrated to Canada in Zambia, but they were on a very small scale. My vision to create sort of a book empire was crafted from that interview. I saw the idea in another light. For Mr. Bezos, he saw it in terms of marketing products and books. I saw it in terms of, in the next few years, people will be going to the digital facilities to look for books, and other various kinds. So why shouldn't I begin slowly establishing myself into this industry, because I was already 1 foot into it. So I desired to break off from self-publishing, because get it from me, I gave them so much money. I got almost nothing. I spent so much time crafting ideas, inventing, theories, working on great manuscripts. And when I send them to them, within weeks, they will have accepted. Sometimes they will accept it within seconds of me sending to them, but I didn't get much from it. So I purposed that I would create my own publishing company. Fortunately, around 2009, I stumbled upon a colleague who was also a lawyer, but he had registered a company and it was not doing anything. So once I shared to him my idea, he said, "Why should you reinvent the wheel? I do have a registered company. You can take over the company." So that's what happened. I took over African Canada Press, and I attracted a few authors, most of them academicians. The first book I think I published with them, one of the first, was Green Medicine. It should be available online. It was published by a professor from the University of Namibia. And several other academicians after that, I published for them, some in UK, some, one I know is in the United States. He's a professor emeritus. He works for the United Nations. I published probably 6 of his books. And then I started looking at the concept of me working towards my goal. My goal is an ambitious one. Borrowing Bezos' formulaic, I desired that in the next 50 years, for instance, I should put more books online than any other author ever lived. I am quite very behind, but I'm working towards it. I should have at the moment about 20 unpublished novel manuscripts, novels. I should have about 38 unpublished fiction, non-fiction books, and at least 20 of them are in production. So if you get that number, much closer to 100 already. So by the next 10 years, I should put another 100 online.
Wow.
Now, the concept I developed is a very different concept. In the book marketing industry, you make money the first 2 months or 3 months of your book publication. In other words, if you don't sell your books within those few months, your book will just be there wasting and gathering dust. People have gone on to other themes. So I intended to change that. Why should I publish, or why should I write books that have got short-term thematic interest? So I decided to be writing books that have got eternal interest. In other words, they are relevant today, they will be relevant tomorrow as they were relevant yesterday. In other words, anytime anyone comes across my book, it will be as relevant to them in that moment as it will have been to somebody 10 years ago who got the same book, because the themes I propound on and I write about, they are themes that outlive their time. So that is the concept that weave within all my work, is that you can enjoy the book today, you still enjoy it next year, your grandchildren probably will still enjoy the same book. And because of that philosophical approach, I didn't concentrate on making my book sell in the next few months of publication. I concentrated on adding volume upon volume. So in the last 5 years, what I've been doing, my families are the only ones who suffer from my incessant and non-sleep nights, is that I work on books. When people go to sleep, I'm awake. So I review my book. The good thing is that I've got education in English. So as a college professor as well, I edit a lot of my students' work. So editing my work is second to none. So what I do is, unless the book is complicated, like one of them, which is a very detailed novel, it's called A Spy in Hell, but it has been reintroduced as Resurrection. This one, I and some other similarly situated kind of publications, I usually, African Canada Press usually use the help of external editors just to make sure that we collaborate our styles and the grammatical relevance of the text at the time. So that makes our work more publishable within weeks or within months of the clearance of the production phase. So what I've been doing is to try to add volume to volume, getting Mr. Bezos' idea. You put it on the market. Some of the books I don't even advertise. A lot of my smaller books, I've got quite a few of titles. I have not even advertised, but every time I check my account, somebody has just stumbled upon him. And the reason they do that is because the volume overwhelms the market. So they are able to somehow they're able to filter through. I have done only one very substantive interview in 2019, but when COVID hit, that program was disturbed. So you wouldn't believe it. You are the major media company probably I am now literally excitingly sharing my vision on. Other people have got it literally just by way of going to the internet. And because they may not just find one title under my name, they are able to find several titles under my name. Google Books has almost every copy I've ever produced. So is Barnes and Noble, so is Amazon. So when people are going to those digital engines, they are able to just discover me. So far, that's how I've managed to sell my books. And I was contented with that in the first phase, because my next phase was to market now extensively my work. And this, I am actually within my second phase, where now I am trying to market my books so they become known all over the world. So in a nutshell, that's my philosophy, and that's what I intend, and my intentions are in the book publishing as well as authoring industry.
That's very inspiring.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned one of your titles, Green Medicine. So somebody listening or watching this interviews, and you talked about how your titles are relevant yesterday, today, and hopefully tomorrow. Can you name a couple of or a few of your other titles that somebody is going to that will inspire them to say, oh yeah, I want to check out that book? Like, what are some of the titles and briefly the theme of that title that might inspire somebody who listening to this to want to buy or get one of your books that transcend time? Yes,
so I have this little book I recently published. It's called the Patch Theorem. This Patch Theorem, the subtitle is A Philosophy of Death, Life, and Time. Now, when we are in the pandemic period, there were a lot of uncertainties. People were dying. We just escaped just like as if we just escaped from a hot fire. But I put a philosophy. In fact, I am the first one, if I may be a little bit selfish here, the first one to have really introduced this theorem. I have done a lot of literature review. I haven't found anyone who has written about that type. So in this one, the philosophy answers the question, what happens when people die? That question hasn't been answered by many or anybody. And during the COVID pandemic, it was very uncertain where the loved ones were going or had to go. I researched all major religions, thought philosophical patterns and schools of thoughts, and I came up with a very small book. It should be about 200 or less pages. This one answers the very important question. Where will I go when I die? In time. I've used all kinds of references here, so it's not overtly religious. I've gotten a lot of interest from thinkers, and I've come up with my own theory. And this theory has got even formulas, so it can be proven. When somebody reads this book today, it will be as relevant as it was yesterday. as relevant as it will be tomorrow, because death happens all the time.
True.
So that is one of those. I have a small little book. It's called 10 Strategies to Defeat Stress and Depression. Now, this one is not from medical point of view because I'm not a medical doctor. However, from observation and just good intentions and good research, I wrote a very tiny book. It can be read within 2 minutes, and it will calm somebody who is going through some trepidations in their own lives. I do have friends who are Muslims, and always they ask me questions. How will I know if I can be a good Christian relative to Islam? And the good thing is that because of my background, I've represented a lot of Muslim clients in a refugee board. So I've got probably hundreds and hundreds of them. And I represent them from the Christian angle. Those who change religion from Islam are persecuted in some countries. So when they come to Canada, they apply for refugee and they have to argue why they should be accepted because they have changed their religion. I have put all the answers in a little book. It's called My Muslim Friends Learn About Jesus. I would probably be happy to read another one. Somebody writes, Some Christian Friends Learn About Islam. I'm not afraid to read such a book. But at the moment, we have one which says some Muslim friends learn about Christianity. And this one is helping a number of people get their refugee claims in Canada right now.
Oh.
Similarly, I wrote a 600-page book on refugee protection in Canada. This one answers every question from any angle somebody wants to go to the refugee board to win the case. So this is relevant to those who are listening to me or who are watching this one, who might be having a claim or deciding how they would do. They can find this on Amazon. It's quite hefty, but it answers every question they are looking for. There have been a trajectory in recent years about the place of Africa vis-a-vis the West. I have spent, by the way, half of my life, almost half of it I spent in Africa, and half of it I've spent in the West. So I feel that I have got the authority to make commentary on how Africans and Westerners approach life. I have got two legs, one in each of these spheres. So I wrote one called A Case for Africa. The subtitle is interesting. It is the synergistic transformation of Africa and the West into first world partnerships. So I envisage that in the next few years, Africa will have also climbed the ladder and become a first nation, and how they would partner together with the Western country for the good of the global sanity and stability. So this book too has got that element of arguments to it. I have got a book on leadership. It's called Laws of Influence. Now, this one can be used by anybody. It was the foreword was given by Canada's first Black deputy speaker of the federal government, Jean Augustine. Now she has a chair at the University, I think, of York or Toronto, I can't remember. And this book has 7 factual as well as principles that can enable those that lead other people. So it's called 7 Laws of Influence. I've got a book which is probably the #1 bestseller, because you see my background, I'm both a lawyer as well as a licensed paralegal. The reason why I want to remain both is because I've spent the last 10 years of my life teaching in colleges, teaching law in colleges. So I'm very much connected to law students or legal students. So when they are writing their yearly licensing examination that leads them to be acceptable by the Law Society of Ontario as candidates who are known as licensees, this is the only book you will find on the market, and it's quite very popular. The exam is taken 3 times in a year, I think in August, in October as well as in February, and it generates all kinds of interest and sales. This one book, it used to be 80 pages, and people weren't very satisfied, so they targeted me. So now it is 400 pages. It has got all the likely questions they will face, and to assist them, I have also created a small book which has got answers, so they could get the same title though. So I don't know where I can find it, but it's quite close here. So they can get this book as well as the answer booklet separately, so they will know what kind of questions to expect and how to go about them. So I've got poetry. Now, I've written, this is the second edition, and online they can also find first edition, but second edition, this has got 700 poetry. These poems cover a period of close to 30 years, and they are all in all genres. One of the areas that is of interest to Ottawa is in what I call Book 6, which is called Ottawa Spectacular. So in this chapter, I write poetry about everything you think about in Ottawa. My first experience of Ottawa, my observations of Ottawa. I moved from area to area, reviewed things, and each time I was struck with the beauty, the clamor, the power, that is no pun intended. This is the center of power. So all of them, you might find a good poem about that in this book. It has got other areas of poetry as well. So I have got 2 books up there. One is called Love Ideas in COVID Times. I wrote this one, I think, when to encourage families that were before the vaccine was invented, was strengthened, to see how they could strengthen their love lives with their loved ones before their loved ones passed. So it is a good book to give to somebody that might not live, or that might live, but how they might strengthen their loved ones. It's good for every kind of relationships. Then I also wrote a pandemic poetry. So I followed the pandemic. So I've got COVID poetry as well that can be found there. Then I've got also this little book which says 100 ways, 100 reasons to read books. So these are in the form of quotations. So those who may want to know why they should read books, they'll find it in there. Then I've got the last one, which I'll show for now, is quotable quotes. But the way you spell quotable there, it's in a format that just simply makes sense. So you might not find the quotable as always. Now, this is a very beautiful book where I've got over probably close to 400 quotations from me, which I've crafted across the years. And more are to come. There are a volume that is being presented, but this one at the moment, it is the one that suffices. Now, I've mentioned probably 10 or so books. I've got 20 others that I can, but they have only one thing in common. They will be eternal in nature. They outlive us, but they will be relevant even for the generations that's to come. That theme never lacks in any of the books that I write.
Well, fabulous. So thanks for that, amazing introduction of your eclectic title. So definitely it's amazing that you're such an eclectic author, which spans different genre. But I'm also we're curious about the theme that you mentioned at the beginning of the interview on law, God, and intelligence. So how does those 3 critical themes you sort of bring together your books and your inspiration as an author and a publisher?
Yes, so that's an absolutely very attractive question. Thank you. The reason I say it's attractive because that's really the what I try not to divert from. If you read my book, it will either be on God, it will be either on law, or it will be on intelligence. Now, intelligence matches various things like, for instance, my poetry, I mean, my novels will be mostly intrigue in nature because of that intelligence aspect. So I may explore those kind of related themes if I'm writing novels. And most of the novels that I've been published, they have got that same ambitious theme. But if somebody reads this, the Resurrection novel, it is interesting because in this Resurrection novel, the main character is a young boy from Alberta, Ontario, who becomes an agent in the security force in Canada. So he becomes an intelligence officer, becomes a spy. He does so well as a spy, but there is a problem. The problem is that when he's taking a phase, teaching in a university as a professor, it was just a front so that he could carry out the mission of spying. So he falls in love with one of his students. Now, he ends up marrying that student without knowing that that student were born, two of them in a family, and one of them was given for adoption elsewhere. So those two sisters never saw each other. So he is invited to attend a conference in Europe by the government of Canada. And in Europe, he meets another girl who looks similar to his wife, speaks like his wife, talks like his wife. So naturally, he also falls in love with her because it's almost the familiarity. Then he comes to, as he's in Europe at the conference there, he has a near-death experience. So he's literally shot and he goes in a coma. So in a coma, he goes through hell. And in hell, he must escape because he wants to come back to life. So he uses all the techniques he has learned in espionage, and he manages to hoodwink the devil in his own territory and escape back to Earth. So when he's on the way back to Earth, he meets an old man, and that old man tells him, look, I have two daughters, and you are married to both of them. You have one as your wife, and one you are also planning to marry her. She's actually the one attending to your almost corpse body or almost dead body. So he comes out, and then he discovers that indeed those two sisters were married. So then a very nasty family court trial emerges because they have to answer the question, who is the legal wife of this man who was at some point pronounced dead and now is back? So you can see intelligence there in terms of real intelligence is there, the espionage conception and all those. You see God there. As he goes to hell, he's helped to come back. He didn't just use espionage techniques, but there was an element of grace there that assisted him or helped him to come out. And then he comes on earth and he enters into this huge legal battle, which is law. So this novel somehow unites all the themes that I live for into one book. Other books are not as fortunate as this novel because they can only tackle one issue at a time or one theme at a time.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Good.
So in terms of what, as a writer, aside from your interest in wanting to transcend time and to make sure that your book is always relevant to the time without having, having a short, relatively short shelf life, what sort of, what is your inspiration or what drives you in terms of, or what's feeling that are you trying to leave the reader when they sort of read your books? Are you trying to just generally inspire them, or what is your goal in terms of, as a writer, so that if somebody comes to, I read one of your books and this is the feeling I had. Like, is there any sort of driving goal you have as a writer in terms of how readers receive your books?
My books are motivated by interest in terms of issues. In other words, when somebody reads my book, any particular issue that is related to them in that particular book, at the end of reading it, they should have found the answer. So they are very practical in nature in that sense, whether they are in the genre of fiction or non-fiction. At the end of the day, I feel like I did something on Earth, if someone finds help or some sort of an answer to something that they are longing to find a solution for. That is what you put me in a grave with a smile, is that I influenced humanity in a positive way. My works, they speak for themselves. Anyone who has read my work will keep on to them, and they will send me responses to the effect that a particular theme or a particular interest that touched them in a certain way was solved. That is really what motivates me.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess you had a question too, Santosh, Mr. Mwewa?
I just wanted to know, I really like your concept of being writing something that's timeless, but also something that's is also profitable at the same time, right? So I guess
That's true.
some things I find it's beyond its time, and then it's not popular during the current era, but like 100 years later, people recognize it's a great book. So I think I'm really inspired to hear that you have found a way to like be profitable, but at the same time also timeless. So how do you make that happen? Like, what's your secret to success?
Yeah, so all my books are written really from what is potentially eternal in nature, but it's the main issue currently.
That's brilliant.
If you look at anything that has really happened, I've written a book about it. COVID, I've written a book about it. If you go to what's happening in the markets, I've written a book about it. If you read my poetry, they will touch the era of Trump, the era of Biden, the Canadian politics, who came what, who came who. So they'll be relevant to that time, but they'll be also very relevant even after that, because the themes at the time I wrote them were hot topics. But I judge that the very themes or certain interests of those themes will surpass the time frame that I wrote them in. So to be brief in answering you, I choose themes deliberately, themes that today are very relevant. Something happens in the world which has got consequences for everybody. For instance, I've started a book writing about the Russian Ukrainian war. I haven't finished, but I'm working on the manuscript. So that, if you look at it, it's relevant because this is ongoing. But I choose my themes in such a way that those themes will be useful in future, probably as history references to our modern times. But currently, they'll be relevant to those who are reading them now as well.
So do you have a working sort of a title for your book on the sort of the Ukrainian war? And with that in mind, do you also have, what sort of theme might you want to promote? Because we're interested what topic you'd be writing about in terms of Ukrainian war. So do you have a working title, and what sort of inspires you to write on the Ukrainian war? Is it the threat of nuclear war, or is it some other type of concern?
Actually, it's related to that. I don't know how you guessed it, but you guessed it. It's the quandary of a nuclear mastermind. The subtitle is how the West were brought to almost non-action for fear to trigger the nuclear war. And the reason I write about this is it's not rocket science anymore. NATO, the United Nations, they are almost paralyzed. Now, the focus of my book is that imagine if 20 countries in the world geared themselves like Russia has done. It will be almost manageable. These international organizations will be almost toothless. And we have two other moments that are cantankerous in nature, Russia and North Korea, and they give the world shivers. What if 10 countries in Africa got the same? 15 countries in Central South America got the same? Then we'll be speaking in times where they will be put in action. They will not fear anything because they know they could commit mass suicides. They could kill themselves and kill others. So there's an urgent need in my book to try to work especially with the UN nuclear agencies, to try to curb the proliferation of nuclear weapons, because this is the only factor that made NATO not do anything literally do anything in Ukraine. So it's a topic that I think has got both current relevance as well as future relevance, because some non-actors might try to model the Putin theory and try to major in that kind of framework in order to rain chagrin and messy atrocities on humanity.
So are you writing the book as a novel or as a nonfiction political oriented book?
At the moment, it's being weaved just like a current affairs document, because
Yeah.
I am making quotations, I am quoting people, I am making suggestions as well as opinions. But translating it to a novel is not far-fetched.
And do you have an anticipated date when you hope to be published, that if people are watching or listening can look out for your book?
That's interesting. I could have published it by the end of this year, but what's changed is that relations are changing very swiftly in Europe. And the point of view I had was overtaken, literally overtaken by events. So it was irrelevant. It wasn't relevant anymore. And remember, relevance is at the heart of my writing, my books. So I found that that line of thinking or line of thought I was advancing had been overtaken by events in Europe. So I am modifying it, trying to see how the developments go, especially in the new year. I had expected that Ukraine would be run down within weeks. It would be, by now I thought it would be a question of the United Nations bringing, charges against Russia, but it doesn't. It's not working like that. Ukraine seems to have thrived or even survived. So that has changed a little bit of my trajectory at the moment. So because events are not as I anticipated. Probably we can say my theory was thoroughly overrun by events. So I am patient now to see how these events proceed. So probably the end of next year, I should put something in the market, the end of 2023.
So what is the best way for somebody to find your book? Should they just Google your name on Amazon, or do you have a website or social media links that you would like to present here so that people can find more information about your books and get your books?
Everything is tied to my name. Where my name is, I am there. Charles Mwewa. I haven't changed anything. If they want to go to Facebook, it's the same name. Yep. Charles Mwewa. They should just add author Charles Mwewa. That one is relatively newer. My website is a blockbuster. It's one of the biggest websites. It contained information by one individual. So I don't recommend people to go to charlesmwewa.com, because they will find more things than they anticipated. I run blogs there. I run commentaries there. I write articles. I got quotations. It is a monument. It's some people call it the the opus. The phantom. My website is heavy, so if they go there, they might find even free books to read. I have given even free answers to certain things people want. The other way is literally Amazon. Charles Mwewa at Amazon, I'm there. Or just Google my name, Charles Mwewa Books. They will show up in many areas and many places. Probably everywhere people are will find my books are closer to them than they thought.
Awesome. And how has the reception of your books been? And since we're in Ottawa, the nation's capital, how has your reception of your books been in Ottawa? Have you sort of connected with different communities in Ottawa in terms of promoting your book and awareness about your publishing company?
Absolutely no. Ottawa, I moved here quite recently. I moved the company here quite recently. I was in Kitchener area in the Waterloo region there, but I haven't pushed much further than simply this first interview with a local facility or like yours, which is Ottawa in nature. So basically, this is really my first introduction to Ottawa, and I don't think many people in Ottawa know me. I look at some of the sales I get from Amazon or other other engines that sell my books, I found only about probably less than 50 people have stumbled upon, and I can say stumble upon because I haven't had any opportunity to highlight my books or to focus them here. So it is a work in progress, and thank you for giving me this opportunity because it is quite relevant to Ottawa at the moment.
Fantastic. We're going to be welcoming you at the Ottawa International Book Expo on March 3rd, 3 to 5 at Lansdowne Park and Horticulture Building. So definitely will be welcoming you. We encourage anybody watching or listening to this show to either go to your booth for Charles Mwewa and the Africa and Canada Press to check out the booth, check out his books online, and to get his books online because you're definitely a fantastic author. What is there any sort of point that you would like to raise about your publishing company in general, or you as an author that you haven't had a chance to speak to it before that you want to raise on our show today?
So at the moment, this is important because at the moment we don't receive requisitions for printing for other authors from other authors. We actually target certain authors. So we actually look for those authors. So if there are those who are thinking if they want to publish with us, at the moment we haven't opened it to the wholesale market. We are targeting the market because of the manpower that is involved to publish one book. So since we are newer here in Ottawa, I am still organizing the work. So the people that I work with can't handle if we get volumes of requests. So at the moment, we are just targeting those, especially those who are in our database who had requested us a few years. We are revisiting them. I might have an opportunity to put it on our website when we open it to anyone that needs to publish a book. One thing, sir, that I think I should comment here is that I wear two hats as a Canadian, as a Zambian. So I'm an African Canadian. Africa hasn't published much. Canada is far much better than Africa. I have got a burden on my heart to assist people of African descent put their works and their views in books. I am probably the first African here in this country who runs such a publishing company that can produce your book and put it on the market for you to sell and or to be known. Probably in the new year, we may be encouraging African authors or authors of African descent to do that. As I said, I wear two hats. That prioritization is not based on the fact that because I am an African also, it's just based on the fact that compared to Canada, Africa is still a desert in terms of book publications. And I want to be of help to those kind of people find themselves in that situation. Most people may not publish because the traditional publishers who are not my company may have to have so high levels of scrutiny before they are taken because the money for them is more important than the story. So they try to get only authors that are marketable, whose books can sell for them for profit. I try to relax that for the people of African descent so that they can also be read. The ideas can be floated out there. Otherwise, everyone is welcome. And in coming years, I will take as many authors who need publication from Canada and the Western countries as possible.
Awesome. So thank you very much again, Mr. Mwewa, for taking the time to talk about your books, your fabulous books that transcend time. And we encourage anybody watching this or listening to this Ottawa Book Expo show to Google Mr. Mwewa's name with author. Check out his books. He has got some amazing books that I'm sure will be self-empowering in your own lives. And to check out our website, ottawabookexpo.ca, if you want to learn more about us. So thank you very much again, Mr. Mwewa, for taking the time. Thank you, Santosh, for being
co-host. It was an honor.
On our show, ottawabookexpo.ca.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Right.
So it's the recording.